I will be out here. And basically, let me tell you what we're going to be doing here. Ask anything. That's the MO. We have some questions that the organizing committee, all of us on the organizing committee worked on. And we together discussed what questions we think you would want to ask, but it's just us thinking what you would want to ask. So let's make it interactive. We'll ask our experts some questions, but I would also go to you guys and say, hey, what else do you want to ask? Or if you have anything to add, then please feel free to jump in and yeah, please feel free to jump in. So let's start with introductions. So Hyunjung, you are with Rotary International, enabling global communication, right, for a global organization that everybody knows. And as far as fun facts go, we go with dancing and cats who are Instagram queens, kings, celebrities, right? Okay, so next we go to Marta, right? Marta is our expert from Uber, and we go with salsa dancing, right, for the fun fact. Sorry, Claudia, I did not get to collect the fun fact from you, but you're with CUDA, right? We know, a lot of us know CUDA, it's an interpretation enabling platform, but we need a fun fact from you.
Fun fact, I like big waves. I don't know if it's fun for you, but it's fun for me.
Well, no, I can tell you, it's by no stretch is it fun for me personally, but I'm sure there are people who appreciate it in the audience. So we practiced maths. Yeah, we did great. And we go with Blackbird.io, who I'm sure all of us know by now. And we have a heavy metal band. I don't know what instrument, but we got a heavy metal band here. And okay, so Yota, practice last name, entire last name, didn't do that great, right? But we go with voice talent, right? Go with voice talent, perfect. And Park Sheridan, honored to have known Park for years.
Long time.
Long time, right? And now in his incarnation in Voice Seed, and the fun fact would be playing accordion, okay? So here we are, done with fun facts, and let's proceed with questions. A lot of times, us involved in the industry are asked questions about, a lot of questions are very predictable. But I want to ask you guys, what question about AI have you ever actually not been asked? Like, what is something about AI that nobody ever asked you, and it's like, why are they not asking me? Takers?
I'll take it.
Go.
I think that something that I've never been asked is what would have you done differently? Mm-hmm. I think that now with LLMs and AI, there's a lot of hype, and we are all like hands-on, like especially from the quality management side. That's where I specialize on, which didn't happen mainly at the early stages of, for example, machine translation. Mm-hmm. I think that now knowledge, apart from like AI being like democratized, knowledge as well. So something that like machine learning people or engineers were doing before, now we have access to that knowledge and allows us to be involved at the earlier stages of the conversation, which allows us to manage risks, mitigate, evangelize with the stakeholders, for example. So I would have loved to do that at earlier stages. At earlier stages, so be in the game earlier on. Okay, fantastic. Anybody else, anything? No? Go ahead, Yota.
I haven't been asked. It's a question that I do get asked, and it's the hardest one. Is that working okay now?
Yeah,
okay.
Now it's good.
Yeah, and the question, of course, is what you asked yesterday at your panel, what happens to our jobs? And that's the hardest question I've ever been asked.
Do we have an answer, though?
The answer I give people is, because, they all say about AI taking over and whatever, and my answer is translators will be replaced. Well, doctors will be replaced before translators, is my take.
Okay.
If we live in
that sounds scary.
Then I don't know. I don't need to worry about that society. There's nothing I can do about it. It affects everyone. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other experts on this question? No? Because then I'm going to throw it to the audience. Can we ask our experts a question that you don't hear every day? Anything that comes top of your mind? Like something that, like, hey, I really wish I had an opportunity to ask this question. And here's Alessandra.
Where's AI not needed?
Oh, that's an awesome one. Let's see. Where's AI? Where do we not need AI? Anyone?
They used to say.
Okay,
They
go
used
ahead,
to
Yoda.
say that it would never be used in the creative fields. Actually, I started specializing in language technologies about a decade or so ago, and when that happened, I had two offers, like be in charge of operations of like the biggest multinational in media localization, and I turned that down, and I said I'd like to work on language technologies, and everyone thought, all of my friends were telling me I was crazy. It's like, it will never catch on, it will never catch on, and it has, and now it is used in creative fields, in very creative ways, so I don't know.
Okay, and it looks like Borg,
So
you're
I was
nodding,
going to
so-
say, reflecting on the keynote yesterday about the future of work, I've read some work on the nature of different kinds of work, and the keynote yesterday was talking about blue collar and white collar. And so the other categorization that I've seen is work of the hand, which is manual work, work of the head, which is intellectual work, and work of the heart, which is caring work. And I think the work of the heart and caring for people, which is a big trend as populations age, is an area where you don't want to have AI. That's where the human connection comes in.
Right, it's like empathy, right?
Empathy,
like empathy,
caring
emotional
work.
engagement.
Yes.
And yeah, no, that's a fantastic one. And I see Jose signaling.
So I have one that I definitely don't have an answer for. So if in many cases we're talking about technology that can be imperfect or that it still needs to evolve, how are we bringing it to production? And more importantly, how are we pricing it, knowing that it's in many cases flawed or not delivering as expected? How do you work on a price model for that?
Tricky one. I think we're all raking our heads over this one, but
Yeah, whatever you do, don't price as everyone else is pricing right now. Stop word-based pricing. That's not how you price it. You need to price for the service that you offer and the continuous maintenance and iteration of supporting the service, I think.
okay. So outcome-based, like services-based, but not price per word.
Right,
Whatever that is, should not be. Okay, fantastic. We have a ton of other questions. So we're lucky to have representation from different paths of life and different parts, I would say, of localization community. So question would be, what AI advancements in your specific field do you find most fascinating and most impactful? And maybe, Yoda, if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot, right? Because of all the multimodality and like the formats, non-text-based formats that you are working on with your career. So what would you tell us?
Well, the most exciting, I think, is the one that's the least perfect, which is AI dubbing, and that's because I think dubbing is the hardest type of localization in general for people, not just for machines. And people that work in the dubbing industry actually consider that they are creating a new original by doing dubbing. And now you have I won't say every other week, but very, very regularly you have a new startup, a new company that basically does just that. Automatically they can make you speak in languages that you don't speak, with the words coming out of your mouth as if you speak them fluently. You've probably seen demos by Heijen, most of you do that. In the cinema, we've seen things, I don't know if you watched Top Gun Mavericks, Val Kilmer's voice being recreated, voice cloning, it's a big trend. Star Wars fans might have seen Mike Hamill's voice de-aged in The Mandalorian. That I've heard gossip that there was an entire film, it's not confirmed though, shot with a single voice talent, and then the voice was masked with voice conversion technology with the different voices that need to be heard in that film. But we of course have text-to-speech. Plain synthetic voices are really, really good these days. We have two companies right here, Aptech, I consult for them, and VoiceSeed have amazing, and they have booths outside. You can go and listen. Text-to-speech technology these days is not robotic anymore.
It's not.
And you can tweak it, you can change the pitch, the speed, the emphasis, the emotion.
Right.
So
The prosody and everything has
that is
changed.
really the most,
Yeah.
that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, because Okay, okay, fantastic. Thank
Could
you.
I follow up on that?
Absolutely, go
So,
ahead.
the video sort of avatars and the ability to speak in different languages that you don't actually know or speak is really fascinating for my field as well, which is global humanitarian service, right? But it comes, I think, with a really interesting question. I wouldn't say a problem. The one that we're dealing with at Rotary is the accessibility, the ability to talk to constituents and donors who wouldn't have understood us before is really tempting. You can, create videos of our senior leaders or volunteer leaders speaking to them in their language about their service, etc. But we also really prioritize fundraising, right? So if we are trying to speak sincerely to our donor base, do we really want them to see us speaking in a voice that is not authentically ours? Even if we're going to them in their language, does that benefit outweigh the idea of a person who they trust and who they want to sort of listen to and have them speak to them, coming through the video as an avatar, as an AI creation? Where is the benefit and the sort of risk between that? And that balancing act right now is really fascinating for our organization.
That makes a lot of sense. And talking about emotional impact, right, and emotional engagement, you really wanted to drive that engagement, right? Just because of the nature of your organization, right? And because, maybe we could, do you mind if we want to hear from the interp field and what you could add to this? Also maybe the state of AI, where do you guys find yourselves?
The state of AI in interpreting is, of course, a very fast-growing curve in improvement. But to add to dubbing and so on, what is fascinating in interpretation is the immediacy. So different to dubbing, where you can have also post-editing, you can have the so-called man-in-the-loop and so on. The key of interpreting is that the product of interpreting is used by people in real time, in the real situation. And this is fascinating for people developing this technology, looking at this use. So the people need to have a technology, was said before about the quality, that needs to be good enough for people to communicate without any human performing this or influencing this stuff, this communication. And this is super fascinating, both for people using this technology, but also for us trying to make this technology really work in real life, in a real situation. And the situation, this is very fascinating, it's so different. So you have people using this technology in so different settings, in so different situations, and they are all challenging, but also incredibly fascinating.
Thank you so much, and it's really fascinating because I would imagine that also opens a lot of opportunities for simultaneous interp, right? Because you really can do it real time.
This is actually what we do, simultaneous, so continuous interpretation without interruption, which has always been the human, so one of the profession, but very cognitive, very good, skilled people have to do it, and we somehow are able to replicate this differently from humans, using, like Daniel Susskind said yesterday, without the intelligence and the skills of human, but we can replicate this in a very good way, and also with these emotions, a little bit, both in the production, so how voices sound for us, but also in the reception, so getting the information about the emotion, intentions from the speakers and so on. And this is something that just started a few years ago, and it's getting really interesting, fascinating from the technological perspective, but also from really the communicative human perspective. It's very fascinating.
That's fantastic.
So in interpretation, one of the, I guess, hurdles to transparent communication is the difference of voice between the interpreter and the actual speaker, right? So, for example, at Rotary, we have more female interpreters than male, but the majority of our speakers tend to be male because of the nature of the organization. So will AI be able to, or is it already able to, pick up the voice of the speaker and just kind of replicate that as well as the content of their speech?
It is already possible to replicate both the features of the speaker in real time. It needs just a few seconds and you can replicate it. Like voice cloning, it's not really voice cloning, but it's similar technology, and you can replicate it in real time for real already now. However, this poses also ethical challenges.
Yeah, that was actually, that would be the follow-up
and it's
question.
open question. From a technological point of view, you can do now already a lot of stuff, interpreting, different to Dublin and so on. There is technological hurdles because it's real time, it has to be fast and so on. But many things can be solved from a technological point of view. Now it's the time also to discuss if you want to have it, in which context you want to have it, and in which context you don't want to have it. And this is a discussion that has to happen.
I think that's where a lot of the interesting questions lie, is at the boundary between what's possible, what's technologically possible, versus what's desirable. What is it that we want the technology to do, and where do we draw those boundaries?
Well, the boundaries, I think, are essential, right? Because the opportunities are infinite, but whatever threats, dangers, like possible misuses are also, it's also a possibility, right? Okay, fantastic. We have questions in the audience.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, so it's interesting to speak about the technologies which I had that our children will deal with. But what technologies are not cooked up yet, but maybe in some 2 or 3 or 5 years that we will witness, but are not ready yet? What do you think that might be?
So if I just...
In AI, yeah.
If I just continue that trend that we were talking about around, the technological possibilities and the boundaries, and continuing the topic of avatars with real voice, the question is, where is the boundary of how much agency we give to intelligent systems, or so-called intelligent systems? So the idea of intelligent agents or digital twins, where there's an AI version of me out there in the world operating, that I give a certain amount of agency to make certain decisions on my behalf, like booking a barber slot or booking a trip. How much agency do I give to an AI system versus not? That's in the future. I'm never one to put dates on predictions. I've worked in MT too long, where they said for years and years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. Who knows?
Right. The crystal ball is probably the most interesting thing, right? Like, where are things going? And yeah.
I'm also thinking of technology that is geared toward responding to or handling AI, right? So if we have so many avatars and artificial creations out there that are indistinguishable in a way from the real, it is important to distinguish between those things, but we can't really do it intuitively in a way. So I'm wondering if we're going to see an emergence of technologies that allow us to tell, is this AI, is this real, is this generated by a human being or not?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating topic, and we see, in the MT world, it was very easy, right? You could penalize MT-generated content because it was recognizable. What do you do now, and what do you penalize? Go ahead.
How soon before we see sign language AI appearing, and how soon before we see the price per word model disappearing?
Sign language question. There's already research and I think some implementations of avatars. First of all, there's translation from sign language into regular natural language, and vice versa. There's already work on that. So I suppose how soon will it be mainstream? I don't know, but it's already being.
It's already happening. Have you seen like actual cases, implementation cases out there?
I saw a demo.
Okay, well, but we're getting closer.
And maybe Volker, who is in the audience and he works in that field, can actually answer that question better than me.
We have the luxury of second microphone. Okay, well, we don't. Sorry, okay, how about this? We take a question there, and then we take a question here, okay? Go ahead.
We all work in content, right? As human species, communication has become increasingly overwhelming. How doomed are we? Because now with AI, it's even easier to create and dump content out. How doomed are we as a society to say enough is enough? Or is there such a thing?
I think society has much to do with that. I'm a little bit of a pessimist in this regard, because in the age of modernity, that's ultimately not what matters. It's not what pays our bills. I think we will see definitely a big counter reaction coming to this, because we're going to move what we see now, we're going to see even stronger 5 years down the line. And culture just counteracts. It's going to be a dialectic process of it. So we're going to see a huge value on things that are, well, in many ways, in production you can already see it. If it's handcrafted, it's way more valuable. So there's definitely still opportunity there.
Anybody else add anything? Or because we have more questions? Go ahead, please.
I wanted to come back to the sign language question. It's basically the sign language, say, translation into, say, spoken language is kind of 20, 25 years behind or so. And one could catch up very easily, very quickly, if there would be money to do data collection. So because the methodology is very similar to speech recognition, machine translation, it's really progress is where the money is, right? So if public funding would be there, a few million euros, then we would have it in a few years.
That would be faster, right? Okay, great.
Because they can build upon what exists already elsewhere.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have, like, you know, in school or the university, there would always be people hiding in the back rows. Let's look at the back rows and see. Do you guys have any questions? I mean, this is our opportunity to ask our group of experts literally any question we want. So, yeah, okay, great. Thanks so much.
Hello, hi together. So I have one question. It's maybe a weird question, I don't really know, but how do you see it? I mean, at the moment when you want to like use the large language models in production, you have a few choices and most of them are closed, although they are called OpenAI. And I mean, last week the Meta 3 was announced and you are like able to put it on your own machines. You have to pay per hour, it's great, but how do you get, I mean, the next wave of AI will probably be more close to the AGI, like the artificial general intelligence. It will cost a lot of money to train the models. Like, how do you like that this industry is basically dependent on this kind of technology that is owned by a few super big companies? And don't you think we should all kind of unite and do something together to work against this?
So Ina's making it accessible and open, right? Okay, great. Dear panelists, or dear experts rather, go ahead.
This is, by the way, a very good question. At the moment of speaking, these large language models are very expensive to build and only big organizations can do it. But it's not really true that only closed models are available. There is a lot of work done by big also corporations. Universities try to do something in the past with some open model, but universities have more problems to do this. But if you take, for example, Meta, but many other big companies, they release in some different form of open source the models that you can, not easily, but deploy yourself for production if you have a team of engineering and so on. You don't agree, I see. But
Okay.
We can
That's perfect. We can disagree in a minute.
There is also a tendency of open source models. And then if you talk about really the last big models that they come out and so on, maybe the things become very more difficult. But many tasks can be solved also in language by models that are not the latest generation of the model. So you can get some generation of the models which are older, depending on your task that you want to if you are talking about AGI, of course not, but if you are talking about some specific aspects of language, you can do it also with not the latest models, that are smaller models, and they are also open source.
Wonderful, and looks like we have a bit of a...
No model is open.
It depends what you define, how you define it.
Okay, could you expand, please?
Open to be used.
By the nature of the technology, we do not know how they work.
Of course.
By the nature of the technology, these are things that we use, and I think the marketing campaign around them is way stronger in how we perceive their value than the actual value that they might bring. They all work different in different scenarios. So even if there was a very big closed source model and a very big open source model, there's not the only value that the open source model gives is that we all have access to it for maybe cheaper. But it's all perception ultimately, and that's the very strange thing about these things.
That's
Yeah, but at the same time, I agree. So they are
Okay.
a black box. If you want, you can hardly, you don't know what there is inside in many cases. So, but I think the question was really the possibility, either you depend, we depend on the big techs in any case, because without the big techs we don't have no more open, close, or whatever, we don't have the models at the moment. May change in 5 years. I think this will change at some point. Technology is going to, I mean, what was impossible to have a few years ago is now accessible to everybody and so on.
Right.
But what he was saying is really so now I want to use an open large language model in production. I go to OpenAI or go to Anthropica or whatever, and I depend really also from a business perspective. I don't know if I understood your question. I depend on their infrastructure and I pay them and so on. But I can download a Llama model, depending on the task I want to do, and deploy it myself. And have some way ownership. It's not really ownership of everything, but of the model or the deployment of the model.
Wonderful. Guys, sorry.
I just wanted to comment. The problem is it's a race. You have like the old model, but the new stuff, it's always closed. So this is what I see is very difficult.
Right.
Yeah. But this is a good question. It's a snapshot. But if you think also in a longer term, what is the last model today will be not the last model in 6 months. Or what is open now was the last model 1 year ago.
I think 6 months, you're being way too conservative. It's more like tomorrow or next 2 days. Okay, guys, it's wonderful to see the audience engaging. So we have a question there, and then we'll have a question here.
Yeah, I have a question about sustainability. We've talked about the cost of training large language models, but what I'm wondering about is sustainability in the future.
I was going to address what you two are talking about, which is fascinating and kind of touches on this question already. Harkening back to yesterday's opening keynote, right? He showed us that when computing was first introduced, for example, they couldn't conceive of how exponentially large computing power will become in a very short time. So right now we're talking about this technology requiring vast cost, vast infrastructure to train, to build, etc. But we don't know how hardware or even technology itself in its soft forms will develop to enable this same technology that we're talking about to be done on a more democratic, cost-effective or miniaturized scale. So we all have our phone. I mean, we don't have them right now because we don't want them to go off during our talk. But computing used to require a building. Now it fits in our pocket. So how are we to know how small and portable and affordable AI will become in the future? You might be able to carry your own AI engine in your pocket and train it with your personal data all the time.
Yeah, or maybe not even in your pocket, right?
Right.
On your wrist.
In your
or
retina.
on your wrist. Okay, we have another question here.
Hi. Hello. With calculators, we sort of lost our capacity to do the maths, right? And with encyclopedias, we sort of lost our capacities to remember things, or because there was no longer the need to know things, because we had that. With AI, it seems that many tasks we don't need to learn how to do these. But I think that tasks are strictly related to skills and to thinking. So how do you see this in terms of teaching, in terms of human development going? Because if we don't need to teach students the future generations, I'm not talking of students because this is related to any person learning something. How do you see this going? Are we going towards a society that is going to lose the capacity to think? Because doing is also strictly related to thinking.
Wow.
If I may retranslate your question to something more related to us, because it's a very difficult question. You would have really philosophers here and cognitive scientists.
I'm sure we do have philosophers in the room.
I mean, I'm not. But if we want to translate it to us, our field is what happens to language learning for people if you have machine translation or even apps that will translate your talk into, let's say, the famous ear plug for universal translator.
Like Babelfish?
What happens if you don't need it anymore, because in a future you will not need it to speak with people in any language? And this is more related to us, and it's a different question, a difficult question, because I would say many people will not learn languages because of the need to do it for a job and so on, but many people will still love to do it because it's just a human activity that many of us enjoy. So if we have a partnership and the two partners speak different languages, normally one of the two partners loves to learn the language of the other person, not only for the sake of the communication. Italians, we can communicate in a partnership even without the language, but because we are interested in the other culture, and we do not want this mediated even by a human interpreter, but we want to have direct access to it. So there is the pleasure, the interest in doing this that is still there on that side. But from a professional point of view, maybe many people will stop doing it for the sake of the profession.
I'm going to add to that. I think it goes back again, thinking about the keynote about skills. So what skills will no longer be needed to learn? So I've heard people say a child born today will never need to learn how to drive because we will have autonomous cars. But it also speaks to the difficulty of predicting when that will be true. But, you know, autonomous driving will come at some point. But there's always the boundary question. So certain skills we will not need to learn. But if you say, well, we need to stop thinking, no, because there will always be that boundary. Right now, so I was struck yesterday by the label that the AI is a series of increasingly capable non-thinking machines. But that's where the boundary is. So right now, AI is incapable of making ethical considerations. So the ethics of AI needs to be something that we do and provide those guardrails and those boundaries. So we will always need to have that thinking, critical thinking capability at the boundaries of where the AI is. And that's where we will still need to focus the skills.
I'm going to add to that we will be placed at the highest value point of the processes. Like, we are optimizing a lot of tasks thanks to AI, but we will still be in any point of it, like from the training of the AI to also like part of the empathy or more critical thinking. We will keep on building the relationships with more than just beyond the screen, right? We will be still doing like the more human part of it, which is like interacting with each other, trying to understand, like from a buyer side, like I want to have like managing expectations and talking to someone else, and that would be maybe like the highest value of the process.
I'd like to go back to the language issue as well, and the high value question reads right into it as well. So language isn't just about communication and understanding. Language is about expression as well. So if you think about literature, poetry, even just talking in everyday conversation, every language has unique syntactic lexical characteristics. Something that we can say really easily in Korean with one word, you might need 5, 6 words in another language to really capture, and even then not really be able to capture. So the mere fact that we can understand each other through a universal interpreter or some sort of device doesn't really fully replace the role of language itself. So people who want to enjoy that delight or that sort of emotional impact of really clever turns of phrase or really wonderful styles of expression, that's where the value of language will really persevere in the future, I think.
Yeah, and if I may bring... No, and because it's related to that, right? Because it's beautiful because we're a captive audience. We all love the beauty of language. And without sounding too philosophical about it, society is going the other direction. We need less words, fewer words to communicate things. Look at the new generation, how they're communicating. And we've never been more alone as society, again, without getting too philosophical about it, We love the beauty of language, and we advocates to say that language brings people together, and AI is there to facilitate and enable those connections. But as human beings, we've never been more far apart, ever. Loneliness and all of that. So how do we, again, when enough is enough, or we're doomed, again, is there a way back? We're captive audience. We can say this to ourselves. It resonates with us because we love that. We have that passion. It's like poetry, literature. Where is that today in society? Look at the new generations and how they're dealing with all of that. Is that even relevant to them? For us, I know it is, but is it to them? To all of us.
Any comments? Or no? I think it was more of a statement than a question, but we have 2 more questions on that side of the house, so please go ahead.
Yes, from an academic point of view, we're trying to train new students for the future to come into the industry. So the question I have is, in what ways has AI made obsolete expectations you have for your new hires? Does that make sense? What skill sets were you looking for in new hires into the industry, let's say 5 years ago, that now may not be a skill that you need as much? Or has it changed? Has it made a difference?
I can start taking this one because it's a conversation I have been having for the past 2 days about education and the future, right? I think that a lot of us, that we might be coming from translation degrees. I mean, we were trained to do just like translation from scratch, conveying the message, and then the localization industry showed us that there was several things to be done, and we didn't have any training for it. It was more about acquiring experience through the years that we were able to pull that, right? So I think that we need to take what's happening in the industry in our day-to-day back to the classroom, right? Back to showing our students, our potential new hires, that translation, it's not translation per se anymore. It's about post-editing, it's about machine learning. We need to incorporate that. Truth is that with the speed we have, the velocity of the changes, it might be outdated very quickly. So that's why we need to be following the trends almost on a daily basis. You never know when a new standard or when a new model is going to be available. So I think that's something also we need to pass, which is we need to be aware of what's happening, not just in the traditional translation way of seeing things and approach, but also in the industry and how the experts on the industry are working on.
Let me add something. Speaking now as a trainer, so I work at a university training next generation of interpreter. I agree with what you say, but somewhere I have a different position. We have answered at the university, generally speaking, and for sure in translation and interpretation, the more technology is there, the more specialized skills are required. We answer with more specialization at the university. We narrowed the skills that people should have when they come out of the university. And this was done in a time where we needed professionalization in translation and interpretation. It had its own right. I think, however, we are entering a time where this is no more the right answer. Over-specialization, narrowing competencies is by definition nowadays the wrong answer, because competencies, skills are no more relevant in 5 years or in 3 years or whatever. So university, especially university training, if you're talking about training 6 months, training about something, you do what is required 6 months later is okay. But university training, where most of interpreters and translators come out from, should go back to a more general, in my opinion, approach, very, very broad approach, back to the root, how it was maybe 60 years ago and so on, with a cultural, emotional, they very often say soft skills rather than the hard skills, which are given. So of course people should know about post-editing and all this stuff, what is useful for the industry. But this is not enough to prepare people for a long career or a long life learning that they will have to do in their whole life. And over-specialization is no more, in my opinion, the answer for the technology.
My microphone privileges, so I'll speak loud. But I see
Can I-
Porek nodding, and I see Jota nodding. So
Yes.
Jota could go first, and then we'll appeal to your academic background. How about that?
I collaborate with the academia as well quite a lot, and I agree that back. All right, is it better? Yeah, and I agree that back to the basics for translation is actually a good idea. There's a lot of discussion going on with respect to audiovisual localization, specifically about what do you teach people, and there is emphasis about what the industry needs. So teach them post-editing, which is, a very hot topic right now, but teach them how to translate without machines as well. What was interesting to me is Greek LSP did an experiment, and they realized that their translators, and we're not talking about students here, we're talking about professionals with years of experience, when they were working on machine translation post-editing constantly, their translation quality deteriorated. And in order for them to basically get their quality back up, the trick was to do creative writing exercises and basically get them to switch to just translation without machine translation aid to get their skill back up, which I found quite interesting actually. And people need to translate, and the better the machines get, you really need this experience, this ability to actually tell what is the error and how to fix it. That if you don't know how to translate without the machine, it's very hard for you to actually pick out those errors and fix them.
And not only this, but you need also more, at least at my time and now also in many universities, you really learn translation, post-editing, this very narrow skill. But you need economics, you need, but at very deep level, not the superficial level. You need other competencies and knowledge, which I mean broad knowledge, that are important, because many people here, have a background in translation and so on, but they need other knowledge. Which
translation degree should be cross-departmental, actually, yes.
That's it.
I agree with everything you have said, yes, but I think that you're describing a more like translator professional or linguist professional, but I think also like we need to consider all the other roles that are part of the industry as well. And I don't think that's incorporated in any degree teachings at university at the moment.
I would love to hear from Porek here.
I was going to say, so I agree with the idea that the pendulum needs to swing back away from specialization, because it's not about what you learn, it's learning the ability to learn. And so the scary thing is not where we are or what we can do, it's how quickly things are changing. And the pace of change keeps accelerating, and that's the scary thing. So, you read things that say somebody who starts a 4-year degree now, some percentage, a large percentage of what they learn in first year will be obsolete by the time they graduate. Right. And people starting college now will go into jobs that don't exist today. And it's that pace of change is the scary thing, and learning the ability to keep up with that change is the key skill.
I had a conversation with Adam Wooden, who I'm sure many of you know, a professor at Mies, and I asked him, like, how often do you update your curriculum? And the answer is daily, right? Because that's the best you can do. Thank you very much. We have one more question from the audience. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Well, I have a question related to education as well. I'm a translator myself. I'm now on an LSP, but I see that one of the problems is as a human being, you have to go through a learning curve. So you need, probably after you graduate, you need many years until you are an acceptable translator. Mm-hmm. And now, due to the quick pace of technology advancement, new generations, they are, after they graduate, they need to post-edit 6,000 words a day, or they need to deal, we are like emulated machines. So that I see that that's not how to do chat with skill, but with the time we need as human beings. What do you think of this?
Who wants to take this one? I might have to call Porrick out again, if you don't mind.
Question, because I
I'll
didn't
summarize
catch
the
all of
question,
it.
I guess. The skills that, like, what skills do people need in order not to become an addendum to the machine? Or maybe you could...
Not the kids, but the problem I see is the time you need to fulfill a learning curve.
Right.
As a human being. And just later on, when they after they graduate, they have to deal with the speed.
Right.
Of,
So once you become a translator...
We are always following the machine.
Right. Okay, got it. So how do you stay relevant? Maybe that would be the question, right? You've graduated, the machines are perpetually evolving, and how do you, at your job, make sure that you are relevant and following the...
new generation that
Yeah.
is not skilled, because we need precision, and to be a good translator with precision, you need experience yourself.
Right. So how do you balance between...
I see that younger generation, they lack that experience, because the times are always accelerating.
Right. The time's accelerating also. They're a younger generation, right? So by default, they're just entering the job market. So keeping up. Maybe we could frame it this way. Go ahead.
I may be one of the few here that doesn't hire linguists. But
Okay.
I hire developers and other people in technology roles, which is already very used to a very high speed of development in the industry. Where maybe when I graduated, people were asking for my skills. I do not ask any skills.
What do you ask?
At all. No.
What do you ask?
When I talk to a new hire prospect, I just talk to the person. I do not care about their skills. We'll see how they adapt in the first months, maybe.
Yeah. But if you hire me and I know nothing about Python, what are you going to do?
Well, I would figure it out in our first conversation.
Okay.
So there's of course something underlying there, like okay, this makes sense or not. But in my area of work, I would say that is becoming the norm, and I would say that now that in the linguistics field is also getting the same pace of advancement, that might actually be happening as well.
Right. Park, can I ask you a question? Sorry, I have one, and maybe I can, before you answer, you obviously in education field, you educate technical people, right? You educate data scientists and computational linguists. So how do you solve for that? And making sure that your graduates actually enter the world relevant?
Yeah, I mean, the way and I was just thinking on the fly, but thinking about this is that the important thing is these are, at the end of the day, these are tools. And as we saw yesterday, these are tools that can vastly increase people's productivity. So I would tend to disagree because it's not so much about their skill set, but it's about how they're using the tools, because there can be vast differences in productivity depending on how they've adopted the tools. And so I think you do need to assess people's ability, familiarity with the use of the tools. And I heard on one of the panels yesterday, people are talking about the 10x productivity improvement you can get from GPTs today, but GPT-5 and the next generations are going to be 100x productivity. And so that is something that you need to assess for people's familiarity with the latest tools, because it can translate into such a big difference in productivity. I've been asking we're building AI, but I've had a conversation with our CTO, because one of the biggest productivity areas from AI is in writing computer code. And so the question is our software development team using AI in developing the software for AI? And that's because it's a huge productivity question.
Yeah. So if we have problems and we have concerns that go back as far as what we teach in college and the knowledge that we need to acquire, with everything that is going on, could you give us a score of what percentage of our attention at this point in time, when we're attending this conference, seeing the state of the art, what percentage of our attention should go into monitoring AI and worrying about AI on a normal day? Are we at a 10% that we should be devoting? Should 90% of our efforts go towards that? Where are we? And I would be really curious to hear from some of you where you think we should be.
Okay, takers?
How do you find the time to spend to worry about AI? what is worrying about AI?
Is there any time to think about what you should be doing, what you are not doing, and what you're doing? What percentage of our day should it be taking?
I don't think we can separate worrying about AI into a bucket that we can put a percentage on, because right now what we're doing is responding to the industry changes like we've always been doing. For example, when NMT came online, we're not worrying about it so much as trying to assess it and see how it's relevant to what we're doing now. It kind of gets woven into a lot of the different aspects of the work that we do, the thinking that we do. So it's not worrying about AI separately in a bucket where we put a percentage on it, but it's now become one of the factors that we think about on all the aspects of what we do. And I think over time, certainly that I guess, for lack of a better word, the percentage might fluctuate. But at the moment, I don't think we might have been a little bit earlier, because everything changes so fast now, but I think we're at a place where we're no longer worrying about it. We're just kind of dealing with it and adapting to it, and it's kind of spread out over a lot of different areas. So it might be a high percentage if you think about it that way, but worrying about it separately as something that we are scared of or fearing, I don't think that's a high percentage at all.
So like from 8 to 9, you're not going to worry about AI.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to translate worrying about thinking about AI, then some time should be dedicated to it. It's not important the quantity of time, it's important the quality of time you dedicate to it. Because very often, if you allow me, for example, in the language industry, we are circling back always on the same discussions. And this is a little bit, at some point, a waste of time. If the quality of time is, if we are spending quality of time, it can be very small amount of time dedicated to it, but it's very productive. So I would think more about in terms of quality of time than quantity.
Okay, guys, we have glorious 5 minutes, and we have 2 more questions. So let's go.
So I think we spend a lot of time about like predicting what's going to change, what's going to be the what to worry about. The other way around is like doubling down on things that we know it's not going to change. I heard the soft skills, flexibility, being a generalist, being able to adapt, being able to have awareness from the employer's perspective. So these are like really areas that I want to double down. And I'm sure that it's not going to change. Hospitality, if you're in a service company, being able to read the room, being able to kind of adopt. So it's more of a comment, not a question. But I think this is like really about whether you're an individual contributor running a large team, you're a business owner. These are the areas that I personally would double down versus always worry about what's going to change. What's not going to change, let's focus on those.
Thank you so much. Anybody wants to add, comment? Jutta?
A comment, yes.
Okay.
I was thinking right now as you were all talking that when I started working with machine translation specifically, it took at least a decade for my sector, in a creative sector, to actually implement it. In the beginning, I thought it was going to be a lot faster, and then I realized things actually do take a long time. I wouldn't worry on a daily basis. Of course, we need to monitor what happens with technology, and yes, of course, everything is going at a much, much faster pace, and the pace is increasing. But I think it's enough to monitor it, know what's coming up, and be flexible and being able to adapt with it, if we're talking about a work scenario, right?
Thank you so much. And we have one more question here in the audience.
So we are human beings, right? And we're social animals. So my thinking is AI our way back to doing that? So can AI enable us to go from being human doings, because I think a lot of the task and the way the industry has evolved and become human doings, will it allow us to have those real human connections to become human beings again and not have to do so many of the tasks?
That's a beautiful question. Go ahead, guys.
Was going to mention this in relation to the other question that Fadal was talking about, but I have a sister who works in the visual creative industry, and this has become a really hot topic of conversation there as well, because we work with words, and AI right now is heavily about words, but it's really expanding fast into the imagery sector as well. And the discussion that she and I were having, and her with her colleagues as well, is exactly that. What is uniquely human about creation, right? And so one of the things that we were talking about is that AI, by its very nature, takes what's already out there, spins it, varies it, assembles it in different ways, but is it really capable of coming up with completely original styles, completely original ways of expressing? For example, even in literature, different authors have different styles. And, the joy of one person's writing might be completely different from the delight we get from somebody else's writing. So, in a way, are we going to be able to go back to that originality of trying to think of how we express things, what ways are there of expressing things, instead of just focusing on what we're expressing and how much we're expressing?
Beautiful, thanks so much. So, on that note, we have 1 minute left, and I'll try and take one more question. A super quick question with a super quick answer. I mean, no pressure. Okay. Great, let's go.
Yes or no? I have an industry question. I think one of the problems of our industry has always been that people out there that are not in our industry aren't even aware that we exist as professionals. And now we bring the world this thing, which is called large language model, which solves not only our problem, but a lot of other problems. Do you have an idea how we can, by doing that, convey to the world that we exist, that, mediating between languages and culture is a profession, and you can do that professionally? And also with AI, you're going to need to be able to do that professionally.
Right. The word language is a part of large language models to begin with. So, okay, super quick, rapid answer to that. Who's the fastest speaker here?
Stop saying that you deliver only a translation, but start saying that you deliver a language solution. Or a language solution might even too vague.
Right.
A solution to their problem which encompasses uses language.
Fantastic. Guys, we are right on time, and I want to thank our panel of experts. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Been absolutely amazing. And equally, thank you guys for all your contribution and amazing questions. We could have stayed here for 3 more hours, but we don't have the luxury, so thanks, everyone.